Welcome back to the Automation Podcast, the world's #1 industrial automation product and technology show, thanks to you, our audience of highly skilled automation professionals. Thank you for being a member of our audience, and thank you for tuning in this week. And in this episode, I actually sit down with Rylan Pyciak from Cleveland Automation Systems to talk about legacy control systems, when to support them and when to replace them. And if you are thinking of replacing them, what things you should consider. First, I thought it was a very interesting conversation. But before we get to that, I have a couple of announcements. First of all, I want to thank Cleveland Automation Systems for sponsoring this episode so we can release it completely ad-free. And I also want to remind members, last week, there was no show last week because I was at the Florida Automation Expo held by ISA. And on Tuesday last week, I released a members only preview of my presentation. So I wanted to remind all members, you can check that out. It's about 45 minutes, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. But with that said, let's go ahead and jump into this episode with Rylan to talk about legacy systems, when you should support them, and when you might want to consider migrating them, and then what considerations you need to take in mind when you do start looking at migrating some legacy systems. Rylan, welcome back to the Automation Podcast. It's great to have you back on the show. I know it's been a little while since you've been on. And for those in the audience who may not have caught our first episode together, could you please reintroduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely, Shawn. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me again. I'm Rylan Pyciak, owner and president of Cleveland Automation Systems. We are a system integration company. We've been in business for 11 years now and essentially offer custom automation services, design and build, full scale, full turnkey systems, as well as controls, retrofits, and upgrades.
Awesome. And so what's been going on? I hear, things are growing out there. Can you tell us a little bit about what's been going on with your company over the last few months?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. The industry has been taking off from our perspective. We have a lot of new clients we're onboarding, clients that are in unique, innovative, typically locations or industries you may not see automation are now starting to introduce new pieces of automation. So it's been a very, very exciting time for us, right? Deploying new systems, trying to solve problems where automation typically hasn't existed or has been very limited. So we're really on the cutting edge with a lot of those clients. And then obviously traditional manufacturing has also been pretty solid from that standpoint.
Now, something we were talking about in the pre-show before we actually started filming was the fact that, even I am getting a lot of requests for training on legacy products. And you've been talking about how you've been walking customers through a process of you got new people, the old guard has retired, they're off, living, enjoying their retirement. And the new folks coming in, they're seeing all this legacy equipment and they're like, what is this? We're not being taught this in school anymore. This is not something that anybody's promoting anymore. This is legacy hardware. And, how have you been approaching that with your clients?
Yeah, definitely. Right. PLC 5, Slick, a lot of these legacy systems exist. They are tried, true, proven, and they've existed for years. But we are seeing the same thing. A lot of our clients are now having younger generations that are entering the market, and they're kind of at a crossroads. Really, it's do you train these individuals on how to support legacy systems, or do you make the change, pivot, retrofit, and upgrade a lot of your systems? So, really, kind of where we're at as a company is looking at it holistically with every project, every client we introduce and work with from that perspective. Really comes down to one, doing a site assessment. We typically visit any client that we're working with on any project. And what we try and do there is capture holistically what is going on, what is your current process, is this existing PLC 5 an integral part of what you're doing? And if we pull it out, are you going to stop production for months or weeks? Or is it something that we can actually upgrade, in a reasonable time frame that works a lot better? So really, I would say it's a case by case basis when we come across this. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is sit down, develop a game plan with our clients to better understand their process, as well as come up with a good game plan on how to migrate away from these controllers typically and figure out where the next steps make sense to go.
Yeah, so a lot of times these end users, they don't have the time to do a lot of research or R&D, or they need a company like yours to they sit down with and say, okay, we know we have a plant full of legacy equipment. where should we even start to look at a potential migration that, isn't too mission critical, so it's not going to cause a major outage if it's down longer than expected. But also, maybe we can take some of those parts, and until we get it all out of the plant, we can take some of those working parts and maybe put them back in the storeroom for some of the more mission critical things that we need extra space for, which, of course, a lot of this legacy stuff is no longer manufactured, new anymore. That's usually the alarm that goes off, the bell fire alarm that goes off that says, "Hey, we have no spares. We can't buy spares. We don't want to rely on used recycled equipment because it could be great, it could be not." So when you're looking at like doing a test or doing stepping in and doing maybe a pilot program to do a migration, what are some of the important things that you have to know from the customer, you know, that, is this going to be feasible or not?
Definitely. Yeah, I think the first question I always like to ask is your process, is your current whatever you're manufacturing mission critical to your point? Do you want something that is making you thousands of dollars per day to depend on a $50 part on eBay? Right. And I think that that's a good place to start because if you're not able to source the hardware, if you don't have it on the shelves, if it's not in your storeroom, then you're kind of at a risk. To your point, usually we want to sit down, understand that process, and look at it and really go back. What do you have in inventory? What do you currently have held in reserves? Because to that point, we do understand, right? You can't just necessarily rip out every PLC, upgrade it, migrate it, replace it. So, really, we want to look at it and say, hey, you might have 10 or 15 input cards, a few output cards, whatever that system looks like. Make sure you actually have spares available to be able to replace in the event that you have some kind of emergency. So really it starts from that perspective. And again, that goes back to a lot of our site assessment. We actually go through storerooms. We create an inventory list. We like to open every single control panel that we come across, take pictures, document, and that way we can provide our customers every single machine and asset on your floor. Here's an entire Excel spreadsheet that shows everything you have. Is it currently produced by Rockwell, Siemens, insert whoever's manufacturer here?
Yeah.
Can you actually access it and buy it, or is it obsolete? And what does that obsolescence look like? Is it something that is still readily available, maybe on third-party markets? Is it something that, hey, you have to send this out and have it refabricated or soldered together, components replaced? So really, it's kind of a risk assessment from that standpoint. And then from there, we typically like to sit down and look at what the migration path also looks like. So those are things such as how does the equipment currently run? Can we pull off any existing PLC programs, HMI programs, really start to architect how the current system is designed? So then we can then have a plan to migrate forward. And I'm sure you've worked with it as well as we have. Some migration tools are great. It'll copy your old code into new, others not so much. So really it's working through that and having a solid game plan on how we're going to migrate those systems to newer systems.
Yeah, it's always great when you get this long printout of ladder logic and it's just ladder logic. You're like, this could be converted to anything without any pains, but like you said, the most important part is capturing what's installed, getting a backup of the program. Who knows? Maybe they don't have a current backup. That could be disastrous, right? Um, getting the finding and getting the wiring diagrams, right? So we assume they're not going to be 100% up to date, but starting with something is better than starting with nothing, right? And
Mhm.
then, maybe even interviewing the guy who's going to retire soon. It's like, we need to interview you. We need to get your take on how this whole thing works and its history and the things that have gone. And most people will they just want to help people to readily share before they retire everything they've known and learned. They want to pass it on. They don't want to leave anybody in a lurch. But you also said, like, it's important too. Like, sometimes you can replace the HMI before you replace the PLC. You can modernize the HMI first. Sometimes you can replace the PLC without replacing the I/O. So there's so many different options you got to look at. And with different vendors, there are different options. So you actually have to, know the vendor and then talk to their people and do that research. So in the past, when you've done some of these projects, what have been some of the big wins that the end user has seen, aside from he no longer has this ancient piece of equipment running his plant? Can you talk about some of the results they've had after you've gone through one of these transformations or migrations?
Yeah, we've had quite a few wins. One in particular I think really stands out is consolidation of different devices and hardware. We're actually currently going through a project right now, and the existing control architecture, the controller itself is a small little third party brand, probably a couple hundred made altogether in the world.
Wow.
So very unique, very custom. Can't access that anymore. That company is no longer in business, right? So we're working on that, obviously migrating that to more of a standardized, well-known product line. Well, um, but what that's allowed us to do is also essentially consolidate where we have a unique third-party controller. We have two temperature controllers that are also very unique, and then we also have a legacy PC system that is doing data collection, talking 232 to another set of IO. So really, when you look at it, you have 5 or 6 different subcomponents that all exist in this control system, all unique, all different vendors, all obsolete. And really, to support it, you now have to know Visual Basic, ladder logic, the custom software for these different things, as well as programming. So when we look at a project like this, what it actually allows us to do is take all of those different pieces and consolidate that down into one control system. And really, where we go from there is we now have one PLC essentially that we can do all of our control with, all of our data logging, all of our IO capture, and run everything off of one standalone device versus having disparate hardware, software combinations to make all of this run. So really, it's opened up a lot of doors on what we can do. And I would say even some of the newer hardware we're starting to work with that now allows you to run different multi-core processes. For instance, where you may be able to run ladder logic on one piece, and it also runs Linux. So now we can do things such as custom applications. We can run Python code. We can actually set up databases and log data. And again, when you look at it, it's all one small little device that we can do all this on.
Yeah.
So really, I think those are the kind of wins where now we can start consolidating, and the technicians and maintenance personnel that had to support these systems don't have to have 15 different softwares floating around just to be able to support one machine.
Yeah, we've had vendors on this show before that do exactly what you just said. Part of the unit is a PLC, part of it is a Linux box, and you could run all these different things on it. And it just gives you, but on the flip side, though, we got to be careful because that still needs to be documented, right? And this isn't going to be pull the EEPROM, put the new PLC in, put the EEPROM in, and you're good to go. If you're pulling this unit out, you got to understand, how do I replace this fancy PLC/Linux box with a replacement and still have everything, both the PLC code and any, I don't know, Python, JavaScript, C++ that's on the Linux side. And
Yep.
so that's a very important part of that. Can you speak to that a little bit about how you guys, with the product you were using, how you focused on that and made sure that they could back it up?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the biggest thing there, one, is a lot of the digital transformation that now exists,
Yep.
right? Everything could be stored, take it back, many, many years. Everything was on files, was on floppy, was on CD-ROM, DVD. We kind of went through all that process.
Sure, sure.
So nowadays, you do have hardware and software capabilities where a lot of this can be stored, obviously on your PC, but also remotely on clouds, internal network servers, things like
Sure.
that. So really kind of sitting down and looking at how we design this architecture, hardware, software combination. Biggest thing is, again, back to documentation. And I think that depends on any system you're working on, whether it be fully electromechanical with relays, or if you're running a massive SCADA system. Documentation is definitely key, and one that we are very, very adamant about whenever we develop any system. I think in addition to that, when it comes to more unique systems like this, is also making sure that you have a structure in place where you can actually deploy these things. A lot of the vendors that are offering solutions like this are now offering software complementary pieces that allow you to basically reach out and talk to these devices, upgrade firmware automatically, do backups. So really, it's starting to bring these architecture pieces kind of more networked and give you the ability to talk to these devices and make sure they're up to date, make sure they're backed up so you don't have any issues, like you said, where something faults, something disappears, and now you don't have any backups to support your system.
Yeah, and it's important when we're doing backups. You need to have a secure local backup, but you also need a secure remote backup. And that goes all the way back to the dawn of computers and programming, and that type of backup methodology is needed because most companies who lose that data go out of business. They can't recover, right? And if you think about a PLC, a very complicated PLC program, no, if the guy who designed that is retired now, how are you going to, if it's very complicated, it's going to be a struggle to recreate that from scratch. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen machines sit for years because nobody could recreate the program. So, and nobody wants to be in that situation. So when we're talking about, it's not just on the PLC or the hardware side, right? There's also networking that has to be considered because everything didn't always run on Ethernet, did it?
No, no, definitely not.
Tell me about some of the legacy networks you're running into.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something else that we're seeing primarily as a challenge for a lot of our clients, right? Is understanding the various communication protocols, networks. You think about it, obviously traditional hardwired systems, device net, control net, Aussie, any kind of CAN systems. Really, when you look at it, the communication protocols that really have advanced throughout the years still
Yeah.
exist in a lot of places that we walk into. And it is becoming more challenging for our clients just for the fact that again you typically have individuals that are now getting closer to retirement that
Yeah.
originally deployed or supported those systems, and trying to identify individuals that have the experience is getting more and more challenging by the day. So really when it comes to that point, we're seeing a lot of those challenges surface for our clients, as well as our clients looking for individuals that do have the experience, both a cutting edge Ethernet, we're talking over Ethernet, all the way back to we have some older communication protocols that are out there. And how do you actually support all those and or again develop a migration path so you're no longer reliant on protocols that may not be as supported nowadays.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be around when device net control net came out in, I want to say device net control net Ethernet IP came out in the mid 90s. And I was fortunate enough to get all the training on it. So I feel very comfortable using those networks, but you never see anything new for those products because they're legacy networks. And so occasionally people reach out to me, they're like, oh, I just don't understand device net or control net. And it's not that they're difficult to understand, it's just that they're legacy technology. And so if you're doing a retrofit, you're probably not going to leave those networks in. You're probably going to go to Ethernet. And pretty much everybody's using Ethernet, whether it's Ethernet IP, Profinet, Modbus TCP. That is what everybody's doing. We even see a lot of devices coming out with supporting multiple protocols that support Profinet, Ethernet IP, and Modbus TCP all in the same product, which is
Yep.
one of my favorite trends of the last couple of years. But yeah, and then there's other technology like IO Link, right? So one of the things people liked about DeviceNet is, hey, I could get all this extra status out of my photo eye. Well, I can now do that with an Ethernet drop going to IO Link to a photo eye of similar capabilities and still get all that information. And a lot of times the vendors will give you HMI faceplates and other things to help ease that side of the development as well. Maybe even add on instructions. Have you guys been doing anything with like IO Link or any of these new Ethernet devices?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say iLink has probably been our number one, I'm going to call it more process oriented device or protocol that we use, right? And it's great. I mean, you look at a basic laser distance photo eye,
Yeah.
traditionally on off, right? 0 or 1 status. Now it's great because we can actually put in it a part. And let's say maybe we're looking at a stack of parts. We can actually get that distance measurement back and determine how many are left in the stack, how far away things are. More on the process side, again, we can actually get flows, we can get rates, temperatures. And from that standpoint, it opens up a lot of doors. And it gives you the ability to actually control based on process variables instead of discrete on and off. In addition to that, kind of more so to where a lot of things are heading nowadays is the data. Right? Everyone wants data, they want to understand what's going on. And having IO Link being able to get process data is great because now we can actually track and look and say, hey, for instance, I might be measuring a temperature of an oven. I see that it performs or does this weird little thing at a certain point in time.
Yeah.
We're able to log that data. We're able to understand it. We're able to look at it. And then we're also able to make actionable decisions on it because now we have access to that data. So IO-Link's been great from that perspective. In addition to that, I think maintenance and troubleshooting, right? A lot of these sensors devices now have built-in indications to let you know when it's dirty, when it's misaligned. So we've been able to deploy that as well, where, hey, now we see a photo eye that it's starting to have issues. This is getting triggered, like you said, from an add-on instruction or something. We can throw a little fault or warning alarm on an HMI, and now maintenance is actually able to go and troubleshoot that before it turns into a problem and stops production.
Hey everybody, just wanted to break in here quickly and thank Cleveland Automation Systems for sponsoring this episode so we can release it to you completely ad-free. We really appreciate it when our guests underwrite our costs to produce an episode. Otherwise, we have to fill it with ads, and honestly, we still don't make our money back when we do that, but what else are you going to do? We want to bring you episodes of the show every week, and sometimes vendors don't have sponsorships budgeted. So in any case, I do want to thank Cleveland Automation Systems for sponsoring this episode so we could bring it to you ad-free. And now I'll return you directly back into this week's episode with Rylan. Yeah, I think it's so cool too that a lot of the new IO-Link devices are giving us not just like distance or temperature, they're giving us all these other variables, which I would consider like condition monitoring variables. They're giving us inclination, they're giving us relative humidity, ambient temperature. Even if it's not a temperature device, it's giving us ambient temperature. And these are all great variables. And, if it wasn't for the advancement on the software and analytics side, a lot of that would just end up in a database and never be looked at. But now that we have these more powerful software tools, condition monitoring on, the next generation of condition monitoring and analytics that use, that machine learning and AI, all those new algorithms to help us sift through that data and find what's really important. I think it's just great, and the other thing that when I had the IO-Link guys on, they said, keep in mind that we're no longer going from digital to analog back to digital anymore. When you have IO-Link, in the olden days, we'd bring the analog signal in 4 to 20, right? But that started out as a digital value in the electronics of that sensor. And then it was converted to analog. And guess what? When it gets to your PLC, it's converted back to digital. But with IO-Link, we just stayed digital the whole time. And that just makes it more accurate. It's going to be less deviation. Not that analog's bad, but it just simplifies the whole thing. It comes in as digital, it stays as digital for its whole life, which I think is just so amazing. And to the points you brought up, I mean, it increases reliability. And guess what? You can actually connect to it with one of the software tools from the vendors and check its health and learn about it, maybe even change some of its settings, right? And in one instance, I know a customer was changing his color sensor based on what product they were running because they needed a different sensitivity for different colors based on the product that was running at the time. So it's pretty interesting stuff. And you wouldn't be able to do that just with an analog out device.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely opened up a lot of new avenues of what you can do from the controls perspective. And it is one of my favorite things too, right? It allows you to do so many creative different things, solve complex problems. Exactly your point. We've had plenty of customers. I'm looking at parts that are either black, white, green, the whole color spectrum. And now I can actually understand what those parts are, be able to adjust my sensor on the fly. So really, it's opened up a lot of doors on what we can do.
Now, I don't want to stump you with these questions, but I thought they'd be fun to ask for the audience anyways. So
Sure.
the first one I'll ask is, as you're going out, you've been doing this for many, many years, and your people have as well. Like, what is one of the oldest products you've seen out there running? We've talked about PLC 5s and Slick 500s. Have you run into anything older than that you had to work on or upgrade, or not to put you on the spot, but there's a lot of old
Yeah.
stuff out there.
I would say early on came across a Moticon. Definitely didn't get to directly interface with it, but the adjacent system that we were actually talking to and running was actually working with this. So I think we saw some of the original PLCs that
Yeah.
existed out there. To your point, I mean, still a lot of the traditional first generation Allen Bradley systems that were ever built are still running. We have a lot of customers, especially in the Midwest, that, the factories were built in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. You go into a dark corner and something's just sitting there moving, humming along. And lo and behold, usually you open it up and the processor typically isn't around anymore, manufactured anymore. So it's always interesting. I get a kick out of it to see what is actually running these systems. And yeah, I mean, there are mixes between that, older PLCs, very old, Bosch Rexroth drives. It's you name it, right? And I
Yeah.
honestly go through my phone. I probably have a million different photos of unique, random, interesting hardware that we've come across.
That's great. Yeah, I remember going into it was like I want to say Chinette factory, but they made like paper cups, paper plates, or plastic cups, plastic plates. And actually, I can remember it like it was yesterday, but it was probably 20 years ago. No, probably 25, 30 years ago. In any case, it was in the Northeast, and they opened up the enclosure and they had a 1774. And I'm like, yep, nope, I don't want to touch that.
Yep.
So yeah, so you see some old stuff out there, and I know a lot of folks out there. If you're listening, let Rylan and I know the oldest products you've ever worked on. We'd love to see your pics. Please leave a message in the chat. If you guys send me anything, I'll send it over to Rylan so you can see it too. And if Rylan, let's talk about your company for a minute though. Where are you guys located?
Yeah, so we're out of Cleveland, Ohio, and we also have an office in Denver, Colorado as well. So we support a lot of Midwest manufacturing, and we actually have a pretty good customer base kind of on the Western coast as well. So your Arizona, California, up and down the coast, and then into Utah quite a bit.
Yeah, that's good to know. So guys, too, if you, I mean, just shout out your company website.
Yeah, yeah, it is clevelandautomationsystems.com. Obviously, you can find us via web. We also have LinkedIn and are pretty active on all the other social media channels as well.
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably where I see most of the industrial automation activity happening versus like all the vendors are on Facebook and X and all the other ones. But LinkedIn seems to be where the most user interaction is. Are you seeing the same thing? To me, it just seems like that's where all the action is.
Yeah, I feel like it tends to be probably the most centralized location where a lot of professionals, industry, advocates and whatnot tend to exist.
Yeah.
I think it being more of a professional focused
Yeah.
social media channel definitely allows for that. But yeah, we definitely see a lot of action. And again, it's a very interesting and fun place to connect, right? Because meet other great individuals. Honestly, I also consider it as a great tool. We, as custom machine builders and solving complex engineering problems, sometimes we come across something that we can't solve or don't know a particular model.
Yeah.
For instance, we're looking for a system that's trying to dispense very, very fine powders. It's great because we can get on there, we can actually post something and say, hey, I'm looking for X. Do you know somebody? Does anyone have any references? And really, it's a great community to be able to access that and see what others are doing in manufacturing as well.
That is a good point. A vendor announced a product. I couldn't find the like the sales literature for it. So I posted on there and said, "Hey, does anybody have this? I'd like to do an update for the audience." And somebody reached out to me and they sent it to me. It was great. So I did an update for the membership. And yeah, you're right. That is, and I always tell people too, if you're looking for a job or you're looking for to hire somebody, if you have a post on LinkedIn you want me to share, because I have so many people I'm connected to, I'm happy to do that. There's no charge. It's just to help other people out. But I definitely like to do that for people. And Rylan, same goes for you. If your company's doing something exciting you want me to share with my audience, just let me know. And that goes to everybody who's listening as well. I'm looking at some of the notes I took earlier, and I think like if somebody they know they're going to do a migration, right? What would your advice be to them? Like before they even call you or somebody else, maybe it's somebody else somewhere else in the world. What is your advice to them? Like, yeah, right, you need to migrate this product. You can't get spares for it. You don't have a lot of spares for it, and it's a critical piece of machinery that, if it goes down, your company could be in trouble. Just throw out some advice to them because you're working with so many customers who are doing this.
Definitely. I would say the first thing is to identify your process. And that goes even further back than what you had written down. Actually go out and stand in front of the machine and record what your process is. Nowadays, video camera, both video camera, but as well as document and write it down. Understanding your process is going to be the first key thing to do before you even look at migrating. I'll be honest, usually we walk in their process, walk in a new customer, and they will potentially provide a scope of work. Hey, this is what the machine does, what we think it does. More often than not, that's not actually what happens, right? So really it's knowing each individual step of what is going on. I think another very, very key thing is talking to the individuals that work on that equipment day in and day out. Your operators are going to have the most knowledge out of anyone else because they stand in front of that machine for multiple hours every day. But being able to actually document that so you can understand how your equipment works, what it's supposed to do, what it may not be doing because potentially lack of maintenance or other issues, but going through that so that you have a good understanding not only of how to write a solid scope of work that you could provide to system integrators such as us, but also so you have better internal processes so you actually know how your device is made or what certain sequences the system goes through so you can sit down, outline that, and then have a better, more clear picture whenever you get into the systems. I'd say that's probably the number one thing that we see that is, I don't want to say it's a challenge because we're really good at walking into facilities and assisting our clients in doing that. Um, but more often than not, we do witness that where they may not fully understand that process or how the equipment works. So I would definitely start there before anything else.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of management feels like, it's like George Jetson. You just press a button, everything works. And it's like it's not like that. It's like every machine is almost like a custom car, a custom engine. And there's a learning curve they all have similarities, right? They all have motors and maybe conveyor belts or, extruders or whatever, but they're all custom made for the
Yep.
typically, not always. I've been in the, and I'm sure you have too, facilities where they have the same machine lined up, 100 in a row. But in
Mhm.
most facilities, every paper machine, every slitter, every, oven, a lot of them are custom made. And it takes some real knowledge and understanding of that particular process itself to work on it. And that's where companies like yours, you guys specialize in that because you see so much out there. But
Mhm.
we get a kind of this, sometimes up in management, we got to deal with that misunderstanding that this is not a custom piece of machinery. It's like your company makes a unique product. So why would you think you would have the same? Why do you think the same product that makes the leather for a football is the same product that makes the leather for a jacket? It's not. They're different processes, different products. Because, if everybody made the same product, then why would we need all these different companies? Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Uh,
Yeah, and,
okay.
and and that's one too, whenever you hire system integrators such as ourselves, really finding a good one that knows how to work together with your team, but also one that is a big advocate as well. And I feel like that's one where we actually step in. We're very human centric and focused.
Yeah.
So really when we come into facility, we want to make sure that we're advocating for the plant personnel, the operators, the maintenance staff, the production staff to say, hey, this is how your current machine runs. Here are the trouble areas. Here are where the faults occur. Here are maybe locations where you're not performing as intended, and be able to make sure we communicate that across the entire management chain.
Hmm.
Because your point, more often than not, right? And nothing against wherever level you sit at your company, but as you move up in management, typically you're not interacting with that machinery as much.
No.
So your understanding, your intimate knowledge may not be there as much as an operator is. So we really try and bridge that gap. We make sure we're communicating not only the wants and the needs, but the challenges of what production sees every day, and making sure we're having that communication all the way up the chain with upper management, C suite as well, so that you are getting the machine you need from a buying perspective, and operators also enjoying the piece of equipment because you know as well as I do, nobody hates it more than whenever you get a piece of equipment and is it set up the right way or have the right functions or insert here whatever the challenges are. So really it's about being that advocate across the board and making sure that you're all on the same page throughout your entire company structure.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. I've been to so many facilities where they say, "I wish they would put this on the HMI." Well, your system integrator can do that for you, right?
Yep.
They can back up what you have. They can add that to. I was at a customer doing some training a couple weeks ago for a large vendor, and they're like, "I really wish they would show us this instead of that." It's like they can do that. That's not hard to do. Take them an hour maybe.
Yep.
So that's another thing for the end users to think about. You can always just back up the original, make the changes, and then try the changes out to see if they actually are better for the visual side of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always say that, especially whenever we're on site, talking with operators, talking with production staff, ask the question. Do not be scared to ask. And especially from our perspective as integrators, we're
Yeah.
here to make the machine run the way in which you want it. And if that is displaying a funny picture, making a unique color, sounding a weird alarm. We are here to help you succeed. And ultimately, we want to make sure we're deploying the system so it works the way in which you want it. So, absolutely, we are always willing to have those conversations. And I always encourage those conversations as well to ask the questions to your integrator.
Yeah, it could even be adding a stack light so people can see the alarms without having to look at the HMI. So that's where these guys can come in. And I know we're preaching to the choir a little bit with our audience of who are pretty experienced folks. Now, as we're running out of time here, I did want to do a couple of check on a couple of things. First of all, do you guys have any events coming up this summer? Any shows you're going to? Anything like that that people should be aware of?
Yeah, not currently. We will be attending Automate and a few of the other larger trade shows. We are not
Okay.
exhibiting any of those currently. But yeah, primarily just more of the networking interaction.
Yeah, so if somebody needs to do a sidebar with you, maybe sit down and talk, a meet and greet, you could probably do that at Automate, since you'll be there. That's like the one show that everybody tries to go to, which is good to know. So for those who maybe are still driving, could you let's just close out the show, give them all your stats. Let's just tell them, remind them again your company, what you guys do, what your website is, and leave them with your final words.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we're Cleveland Automation Systems. You can find us at our website, clevelandautomationsystems.com. And ultimately, what we do is provide turnkey automation solution. So that's custom design and build. We're also a system integrator. So that tends to fall a lot on retrofits, system upgrades, PLC programming. We are certified FANUC authorized system integrator as well. So obviously, we do support your Allen Bradleys, your FANUC, in addition to that, we are agnostic, as I like to say. So that is Siemens, Mitsubishi, Omron, pretty much you name it with the PLC brand, and same with robotics, HMIs. Ultimately, we're very experienced from the controls perspective, mechanical and electrical. So really come to us with any kind of challenge, and we're able to solve a lot of those challenges when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and we didn't really talk about the custom machine building part of your business. Could you just spend, I know we talked mostly about system integration, but could you
Yep.
just talk about that for just a few seconds here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we basically do turnkey systems as well. So that's anywhere from a 400-page scope of work document of exactly how your system should run, all the way back to here's a napkin sketch of what I have in mind. Right? We like to kind of fill all those gaps, and really that is all the way from here's a concept, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, design, build, assembly, and then running those off at our facility, shipping to your facility, and now you have a new piece of equipment. So ultimately, anything in the general manufacturing realm we like to work on and can support. And really, we just ask, reach out. We like to have conversations. We have a lot of very unique and innovative new areas that we're working in. So yeah, I'd like to have the conversations of what's out there and what people are trying to solve.
Excellent. Thank you. I think we covered that a lot more in the first episode. So appreciate you going back over that. Was there anything else? Just looking at the time. I want to respect your time. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover in today's episode?
No, I think we talked about a lot of it, Sean. I think maybe the final remarks, and we touched upon it a lot in our first, is just getting exposure to this industry. It's something I'm truly passionate about as an individual, and really trying to open up doors to encourage the next generations that are coming out of high school, out of community college, out of any kind of location of, hey, manufacturing is out there. I honestly don't think it's going anywhere, and trying to have those conversations, whether it be a podcast, a conversation at the grocery store of this is what I do, this is where I work, and this is why it's exciting. I think us as a community can do a lot better job and to continue to have those conversations. So that way we're encouraging the next generations to get into this industry and keep supporting it for longevity.
Yeah, I want to encourage that too. I was sending my grandchildren, who are teenagers now, my oldest ones, pictures of some programs I was doing on a VIC 20. Long story, but they were amazed. I'm like, this is from my preteen. So yeah, we want to encourage our youngsters, whether it's Lego League or being a maker or playing with Arduinos or Raspberry Pis. That we want to encourage them in, for those who gravitate towards that type of making, creating, manufacturing, programming. We just want to all be there for them. So, Rylan, I really appreciate coming back on the show. It was great talking to you about these migrations and legacy systems. And just again, thank you for coming back on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Sean.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I want to thank Rylan for coming on to talk about legacy systems. And I also want to thank Cleveland Automation Systems for sponsoring this episode so we can release it to you ad-free. I also want to thank our members. Members, don't forget that there is an episode last week in which I did my Florida Automation Expo presentation, kind of a dry run through it. And I think you guys will enjoy that. It's about 45 minutes. With that said, I want to thank you all for tuning in again. I want to wish you all good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.